Okay, I'm back. I've measured out my oils, my lye, and the water. I did want to mention one thing. When you're making soap, it's very important that you have a good recipe, and you need to use a soap calculator. And there are several that are online. A lot of people use Soap Calc. That's the one that I use. That's at soapcalc.net. There's also Majestic Mountain Sage. There's another one. I think it's Miller Soap has one. But the reason why you want to use a calculator is because each of the oils has a different, what's called a saponification value, and so that's at the rate at which the lye saponifies or makes the oil and water into soap. It's also important that you use the right amount of water, the right amount of lye. If you use too much lye, your soap is going to be dry and burning. If you use too much water, it's going to take a while for it to cure. And so let me I'm just going to briefly go over Soap Calc real quick. So this is soapcalc.net, and you don't have to have an iPad, but it makes it a lot easier. You can always just print out your recipe. But what you're going to do is up here, and this right here, it has NaOH, which is sodium hydroxide, and that's what you use to make bar soap. And then there's KaOH, which is potassium hydroxide, and that's what you're going to use to make your liquid soap. And you're also going to do the weight of oils. And earlier I mentioned that you have to weigh all of your ingredients. So you're going to go by the weight. So if you see a recipe that says, you know, use 5 ounces of coconut oil, that's not 5 ounces by volume, that's 5 ounces by weight of coconut oil. So you can put in like however many pounds you want. I'm actually going to do this in pounds. I said I do grams, but let's see, 500 grams is just a little bit over a pound. And there's some grams to ounces calculators if you want to use those. Water as a percent of oil. This is where you would enter whether you're going to do a water discount. And what that means is you can kind of play with the amount of water that you're going to have in your soap. Since I'm making a detergent, a laundry soap, I'm not as concerned. Usually I would use a little bit more water on this, but I'm doing mine at a 30% discount. Super fat is the, normally when you're making a bar soap, you want to add oil so that it'll moisturize and condition the skin. Again, since this is a laundry soap, I'm not going to do that because it'll add extra oil into the clothes, and I don't want that. So down here is where you're going to enter the oil that you are going to use. And since I have an iPad, it's a little bit different if you have a desktop or a laptop, but the idea is still the same. You're just going to scroll down, pick out the oil that you need, and then you're going to come over here and click on the plus or minus and add it. Now, what I did is my soap is going to be 75% lard and 25% coconut oil, so I just put in the percentages, but you could put in, you know, the actual grams that you have or ounces that you have. Okay, so once you've gotten all your oils in, then you just hit this calculate recipe, and it'll calculate, and then you hit view or print, and then it will tell you how much water you're going to need and how much lye, and then it has the amount of oils that you're going to need. And so then if you look down here, it will tell you the characteristics of your bar. So my soap is going to be pretty hard. It's going to be fairly cleansing. It's not going to be so conditioning, but that's because, again, I you know, did a higher water discount, so, or I'm sorry, a lower water discount. So that's just kind of an overview of the Soap Calc. And I wanted to go over that because a lot of times when I've seen other tutorials, I don't really talk about the soap calculator, and it can be kind of, I don't know, overwhelming when you don't know, if it's your first time doing soap and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's just good to be able to play with that. Even if I found a recipe online, a soap recipe online, I still run it through the calculator, just because there's so many things that can go wrong. And the good thing about all of the calculators is they have kind of like a little blurb about the different types of oil, so you can kind of design your own soap based on the characteristics that you want, like, olive oil, or if you want castor oil, which adds lather. There's a lot of good tutorials out there. Candle and Soap at about.com it's an excellent resource. I mentioned Miller's Soap. There's a lot of Yahoo groups that you can join to get some more ideas. So just surf the web, but I just kind of wanted to go over, using the soap calculator, because it's very important that you know how to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to mix my lye. And when you're doing soap, you want to make sure that you mix your lye into the water and not the other way around, because if you do put water in the lye, it's gonna volcano. Like I said, I keep saying, it's very corrosive, it's very volatile, so you don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully pour my lye into the water, and I'm going to continue stirring as I do that. Also, the thing to keep in mind with lye when you first start it can give off a vapor, so don't stand like with your face right over it and breathe in that vapor, because it's very very volatile. So I'm going to add this in, and I'm just going to stir. Okay, and I don't know, I'm going to see if I don't know if you can see that very well, but I want to make sure that this all gets dissolved. So I'm just going to keep stirring around, and eventually it's going to get kind of clear. And I don't know if you can see, but do you see the vapors that are coming off? So this is going to be really, really hot. I'll measure it in a second and see what the temperature is, but I'm just stirring. I'm trying to see if you guys can see that. But it's starting to get dissolved. You want to make sure that it's all dissolved before you go any further. One time I poured some lye and thought I had stirred it all up, and the phone rang or something happened, and I left and came back, and it was like stuck to the bottom of the pitcher, and I had to throw everything away. So just make sure it's totally dissolved. Okay, so this is starting to get clear down at the bottom. I don't think you guys can see that, but it's starting to get clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this in my sink. I've got my window open so that it can kind of cool off. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my coconut and lard. I've got my crock pot on. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, because this is pretty hot, is I'm going to take this out. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to add my oils in here into the crock pot. Let me do another hand. And these are going to melt. So when you're using, this is a kind of a different recipe for me. Usually when I'm making soap, I usually make personal soaps, like bar soaps, for personal use. So I will use a little bit more soft oils. These are saturated oils, and so things like cocoa butter, shea butter, coconut oil, lard, your vegetable shortening. They're going to be hard at room temperature, and so you have to get them melted. And as I said before, the oils and the water need to be at the same temperature. And my crock pot was pretty hot, so that's why I took it out of the base here. And I'm just going to kind of let these melt. And so kind of the probably the hardest part about making cold processed soap is making sure that the oil and water are at the same temperature. That can get to be kind of a pain to wait for that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off, because that's just going to melt for a little bit. I'm going to check my water to see how hot it is. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. Let me slip my glove on real quick. Get my thermometer. So let's bring this up. Okay, so my lye is at about 160. Well, it was at about 165, so it's pretty hot. I got to let that cool down to, like I said, about 110. I like to do it at a higher temperature, not too high, not like 120, because I don't want to overcook it or do it too high, because that can cause problems. But I'm going to let that cool down, and what I can do is just fill the sink with some cool water and just kind of let it cool down. I'm going to check the temperature of my oils. They haven't melted totally yet, so hopefully it won't be too long before they are at the right temperatures and we can do the next step. Talk to you then.